The wind howls across the dry Texas field like it's carrying a secret long buried. A 5-year-old girl stands still in the playground and whispers, "The dog in the field is waving at me." The adults see only weeds and cracked soil. But when she kneels and touches the earth, a dusty black nose rises from the ground, faintly breathing. No one understands how she knew. But she heard it a call from a forgotten soul. This isn't just a rescue. It's a journey to uncover what was buried 25 years ago and to finally set it free. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful, emotional, and mysterious storytelling films from us. Under a sky bleached pale by the Texas sun, the wind howled like it remembered something it couldn't forget. Dry grass, tall and sharp as blades, bowed in submission as gusts tore across the open field behind the small farmhouse. Dust rose like smoke, spinning in tiny funnels before vanishing just as suddenly. The swing set groaned on rusted chains, shifting back and forth with no one on it, like the ghost of some unseen child had just left. Lily was 5, small for her age. A tangle of blonde curls framed her freckled face, and her bare feet were stained red from the clay-rich earth. She was chasing a yellow balloon that had long since deflated, dragging it along by a frayed string. Her laugh had been loud just a second ago. But now, silence. Her mother Diane stood at the kitchen window drying her hands. She froze when she saw Lily stop moving. Not just stop, but lock in place like a doll suddenly switched off. Her shoulders stiffened, her head tilted, and her eyes didn't blink. Tom, Diane called, voice tightening. Tom, Lily's father, was halfway across the yard, replacing fence wire. He looked up, squinting against the wind, then started walking briskly toward the house. Lily, meanwhile, stood in the center of the backyard, hands slack at her sides. Her gaze locked on the field beyond the old fence. The sky above her pulsed with churning gray, and the air had that quiet metallic smell that comes before a storm. She whispered something, so soft Diane couldn't hear it at first. Then Lily repeated it louder, clearer. "The dog in the field is waving at me." The wind stopped, dead still. Even the creak of the swing halted, as if the whole world leaned in to listen. Diane stepped out onto the porch, heart pounding. What baby? Lily slowly lifted one arm and pointed. Across the fence, the wide-open field stretched endlessly, just dry grass and earth cracked from weeks without rain. There was nothing there. No dog, no movement, just the wild hush of space. But Lily was breathing faster now, her little chest rising and falling like she was bracing for something. Tom joined Diane. "What's going on?" "She says, there's a dog out there." Tom looked. "There's nothing, no dog." Then Lily moved. It wasn't a walk, it was a sudden bolt, as if something yanked her forward by the ribs. "Lily!" Diane screamed, leaping off the porch. Tom took off in a sprint, dropping his tool belt in the dirt. But Lily was already at the fence. She climbed it like she'd done it 1,000 times before, even though Diane had told her again and again never to go near it. The wood was old, splintered, its posts leaning. Her small foot slipped once, but she caught herself, then dropped down into the field on the other side. Tom cursed under his breath as he chased after her. "Lily, stop!" But she didn't stop. She ran, through the dead grass that rose to her waist, past thistles and brittle stalks that clawed at her legs. Her arms pumped at her sides, hair whipping wildly around her face. But her eyes were fixed straight ahead, on something only she could see. The wind picked up again, this time with a low, mournful howl like it didn't want her to reach what she was running toward. Diane clambered over the fence in a panic, nearly losing her balance, and tumbled down the other side. Her knees hit dirt hard. She didn't feel it. She scrambled up, brushing hair from her face, scanning for her daughter. "Lily!" she screamed. But Lily was already deep into the field, her small frame shrinking with every step. The grass blurred around her like waves. Then she stopped, just stopped, in the exact center of the field, where the ground dipped into a shallow bowl no one had ever noticed before. Tom caught up to the fence, breath ragged. He couldn't see anything except the top of Lily's head. "What the hell is she doing?" Diane stood beside him, her voice shaking. "She said the dog was waving." Tom shook his head, jaw clenched. "There's no damn dog." But Lily raised her hand again, this time higher. And then slowly, she knelt. Not like a child playing, like someone reaching for something sacred. She leaned forward, pressing her palms to the ground, whispering again. The wind circled her like a funnel, pulling loose grass into spirals around her. A low hum built under the air. Not thunder, not wind. Something deeper. Tom hopped the fence and ran. But Lily didn't move. She dug with her fingers. Not randomly. Not like a child pretending. She dug with purpose. Her hands tore at the earth nails, bending fingers filthy. She grunted little cries coming from her mouth as she scooped and clawed the soil. Then she gasped. Her hands froze. From beneath the cracked dirt, something emerged. A nose, black, wet, moving. Lily exhaled. He's here. Tom reached her just in time to see her hands trembling as they hovered over the snout of an old dog, barely visible, coated in dust, lips quivering. Its breath rattled. One leg twitched, reaching. Not a wave, a plea. Lily looked up at her father, eyes calm now. He waved at me for days. In my head, I had to come. And the wind stopped again, like it had delivered its message and was now waiting for the rest of the story to unfold. The earth was still trembling, not the kind of trembling that rattled dishes or shook trees, but something more delicate, like the land itself was breathing. And Lily, kneeling in the dry bowl of the field, felt every breath. Her hands hovered over the cracked soil. Fingers twitching, she didn't blink. Her small lips were parted just slightly, as if she was listening to something underneath her. Something buried but not silent. The wind had calmed, but the air remained thick. The sky pressed low and heavy, as though it too was watching. Tom skidded to a stop behind her, dirt clouding around his boots. Diane collapsed beside him, seconds later, knees hitting the ground with a thud, chest heaving, her hair wild in the wind's wake. Both of them looked at their daughter. Lily, Diane rasped, but the child didn't answer. She dug again, faster this time. Her hands moved like she knew, as if the location had been whispered to her long before she arrived. Tom reached out, gripping Lily's wrist, but she shrugged it off with a strength that surprised him. "Baby, you have to stop," Diane pleaded. "There could be snakes." "He's here," Lily whispered. Her voice was steady, certain, not a question, a fact. And then, with one last scoop of cracked dirt, a nose, it pushed up through the soil like a root searching for light. Black, rounded, wet. It twitched once. Tom froze. Diane covered her mouth with both hands. Then a paw followed. A trembling, dirty paw. Gray fur matted with soil. The claws scratched lightly at the surface, slow and weak, like a signal from a body too far gone. The child didn't flinch. She leaned closer, whispering, "Hi, Toby." The name fell from her lips like she had said it 1,000 times before. Tom looked at Diane, confusion warring with fear in his eyes. "Did she say Toby?" Diane nodded, speechless. Lily began to brush the dirt away from the dog's face. The skin around its eyes was thin, wrinkled. A scar trailed down its muzzle. It was old, exhausted, half buried, but somehow still breathing. "He's been waiting," Lily said. "He kept waving at me." Tom tried to catch his breath. "We need to get help. Now." He fumbled for his phone, dialing animal rescue with shaking fingers, while Diane knelt beside Lily, eyes wide with disbelief. "Sweetheart, how did you know?" she asked, her voice cracking. "How could you possibly know he was here?" Lily didn't look at her mother. Her fingers stroked the dog's head, gentle and reverent. "I saw him in my dreams," she murmured. "Since I was little." The dog shifted barely. A low, broken sound escaped its throat. Not a bark, not a growl. Something in between. A cry soaked in dust and time. "I dreamed the field," Lily went on, "and the crack in the ground, and his paw." She held up her hand. "He kept doing this in my head, waving." Diane stared at her, utterly stunned. The child's eyes were distant, like she wasn't all the way there. Or maybe like she was more there than the rest of them had ever been. Tom's voice broke through the moment. "They're sending someone now. Emergency response." I told them it was urgent. The dog gave a short, sharp tremble. His ribs heaved beneath the cracked earth, his body too weak to move, but too stubborn to die. Lily looked into his eyes. They were cloudy, unfocused, but they were there. "He knows me," she said softly. Tom stood back, hand on his hip, mouth tight. "How is that even possible? The damn dog's a stranger. We've never seen him before." Diane shook her head. "No collar? No tag? And he's so old. He couldn't have come from far." She looked out over the field, scanning the horizon. Nothing. Not a house. Not a barn. Not a soul. "How long's he been down there?" Tom whispered. "Buried like that," Lily answered before Diane could. 12 days. They both turned to her. "How do you know that?" Tom asked. Lily blinked slowly. "He told me. In my sleep." And there it was, again, that electric silence. The kind that didn't belong to wind or earth or reason. The kind that slipped under your skin and stayed there. A crow cawed somewhere in the distance. The sound cracked the moment like glass. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, the dog moved his head toward Lily's lap. His nose brushed her knee. He remembered her, even if it made no sense. Even if time and logic had long since broken down in the face of this impossible reunion. Diane's eyes welled. "We need water. He's dehydrated." She stood and ran toward the house. Tom stood over Lily, at a loss. Honey, it's not the first time I met Toby, Lily said, still stroking the dog. He found me before I was born. Tom's mouth opened, then closed. What do you mean? Lily looked up at him then. Her eyes weren't wild. They were peaceful, certain, when I was still inside Mom. I heard him. He was trapped. He was scared. He waved at me. Tom swallowed hard. That's not how things work, baby. Lily looked back down. Maybe not for you. Sirens began to howl faintly in the distance, rescue finally on its way. Lily leaned close to Toby's ear. Help's coming okay? Just hold on a little longer. Tom stepped back, needing space to breathe. He looked out at the field that had seemed so dead, so ordinary, just an hour ago. Now it felt like a place with a heartbeat. Diane returned with a bowl of water. Lily cradled Toby's head and brought the water near his mouth. His tongue flicked once, then again, barely able to lap, but trying. And in that moment, he wasn't just a stray dog pulled from the dirt. He was somebody. Where do you think he came from? Diane asked quietly. Lily didn't answer, because deep down she already knew. But it wasn't something she could explain. Not yet. The animal rescue van cut through the dust like a ship through fog, its red lights flickering against the golden haze of late afternoon. Paramedics in dark green vests rushed across the uneven field, carrying a stretcher modified for animals muttering in clipped voices and crouching low as they approached the girl and the half-buried creature she refused to leave. Lily wouldn't step back. She knelt beside the dog, like a guardian. One tiny hand resting gently on his sunken ribcage, the other still smoothing the dirt away from his flank. He's okay, she whispered mostly to herself, but loud enough for the universe to hear. He just forgot how to wake up. The dog, now officially breathing, albeit faintly, lifted one ear at the sound of her voice. His body trembled under her touch. The medics hesitated. He won't bite, she said, with a calm authority far beyond her 5 years. He knows I'm not leaving. Tom and Diane stood a few feet away, stunned and muddy and silent, watching this strange bond unfold. The wind had died. Even the earth seemed to pause. The lead medic gave a quiet nod. Okay, kid. You stay close. We'll move slow. They worked carefully, slipping a padded strap beneath the dog's frail belly and securing him gently onto the stretcher. He didn't resist. His tail didn't move. His eyes barely fluttered. But his breathing remained shallow, but present. Hospital's 20 minutes out, one medic said. He's got a chance, but not much. This one's seen hell. Lily walked beside the stretcher the entire way to the van. She climbed in with them. She didn't ask permission. Tom tried to argue. She's 5. She needs to ride with us. But the medic shook his head. I don't think she's going anywhere without that dog, sir. So they let her go. The vet hospital was a repurposed barn at the edge of town. Inside, the staff moved quickly, setting up IV fluids, checking vitals, testing reflexes. The room smelled like alcohol and cotton-warm metal and animal fear. Lily sat in the corner on a little plastic chair legs, swinging her face blank and wide-eyed. She didn't speak until one of the nurses trying to distract her asked, "What's your friend's name?" She blinked as if surprised they didn't already know. Toby. The nurse jotted it down, smiling politely. Well, Toby's tough. He must have been underground for a while. How'd you know he was there? Lily's voice was soft, unblinking. He told me. Uh-huh, the nurse said, still smiling like adults do when they hear something strange and don't want to seem rude. You must really love dogs. Lily didn't respond. The vet walked in, then grizzled, gray-bearded gruff in that Texas way. That meant he'd seen too many sunrises and too many good animals die. He looked Toby over and gave a slow whistle. Well, damn, he muttered. He's got scars that look 20 years old, maybe more. But no collar, no microchip, no records in the local shelters. He pressed a thumb against Toby's hind leg, where a long, pale scar curved like a half moon. This here? That's not from this year. Maybe not even this decade. Diane, watching from the hallway, stepped forward. You mean he's a stray? Stray or ghost, the vet said. He's old, real old. But that's not what's bothering me. He turned to Lily. What color are Toby's eyes? Light green, she answered instantly, but cloudy now. Everyone in the room paused. The vet narrowed his eyes. You looked at him before they opened. You saw? No, Lily said. I just remembered. How about this scar, he pointed. Right paw, she said. He got cut by barbed wire trying to reach a baby bird. Silence, Jesus Atek whispered. How'd you know that, honey? Diane asked carefully. Lily turned toward her mother for the first time, seeming a little nervous. I saw it in my head. Since I was small. Like real small. Tom stepped into the room, then having just finished with paperwork, small like when Lily looked at him, before I was born. No one said anything. Even the machines seemed to grow quieter. Diane sank onto a bench beside her daughter. You mean, you dreamed it? Lily shook her head. No, it wasn't dreaming. Toby waved at me. In the dark. He didn't have words, just feelings, pictures. The vet walked away, muttering something under his breath about reincarnation and ancient souls. But the rest of the room stood still, unsure whether they were dealing with something miraculous or something terrifying. Later that evening, Lily sat on her grandmother's porch. The sky now washed in deep violet, the stars flickering to life like they'd always been there. Toby was sedated in the clinic but stable. Diane made tea with shaking hands. Tom paced inside. Her grandmother Eleanor was quiet. She watched Lily closely. You knew him, she said finally. Didn't you? Lily nodded. Eleanor stood, walked back into the house. When she returned, she was holding something old, weathered edges curled from decades of air and time. It was a photograph. A young girl, maybe 7 years old, stood barefoot in a garden. Behind her, a dog sat obediently, gray fur eyes bright, a scar on his paw. Lily reached out and touched the photo. Her finger landed directly on the scar. That's him, she whispered. That's Toby. Eleanor didn't blink. That photo was taken in 1998. That dog was mine. He vanished in a storm and never came back. Lily looked up slowly. He didn't vanish, she said. He got trapped. Eleanor's throat worked around a word she couldn't say. Her hand trembled as she set the photo down. Maybe that's why he came to you, she whispered. To be found. Lily looked back at the stars. I think he always knew where to go. And the wind picked up again just a little, a breeze, almost like a sigh. Under the heavy silence of Eleanor's farmhouse, the living room became a time capsule. The edges of memory curled in like smoke wrapping around old furniture and thicker truths no one had touched in years. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, the photograph resting lightly on her knees. Her fingers didn't tremble. She stared at the image with a calm too still for a 5-year-old. Her head tilted slightly, as if listening to something behind the frame. Diane sat frozen on the couch, her elbows on her knees, mouth slack. That's me. She leaned forward, took the photograph, brought it close. She didn't even notice her hand shaking. That's me. 6 years old. That was our old garden, behind the storm shed. Her voice cracked. And that's Toby. Tom squinted at the image over her shoulder. Jesus. The dog in the photo wasn't just similar, it was identical. Gray fur with the same streak of white across his muzzle. Same long ears, same tired eyes that somehow carried a whole sky inside them. Even the scar on his right paw was visible in the picture, but the photo was dated 1998. It had yellowed edges and a faint oil stain from time. There was no doubt this was decades old. And yet, he looks exactly the same, Tom said. This isn't just a same breed thing. That's the same dog. Diane kept staring at the picture, barely breathing. Eleanor sat in the corner chair, her hands clasped tightly, knuckles white. We lost him, she said, her voice dry as wood. The week after that photo? Remember the tornado? The one that took half the roof and 2 of the neighbors' horses? We couldn't find Toby for days after. We thought he'd run off, got scared, or maybe got hit by debris. Diane nodded slowly, haunted. We looked for weeks. He was gone, Eleanor said. Vanished. No one found him. We told you he probably ran off and found another home. But the truth is, I didn't have the heart to tell you. She stood up, walked slowly to the bookshelf. From behind a row of gardening books, she pulled out a second photo, blurrier, older. A shallow dirt mound beneath a willow tree. A small wooden cross. We found his body 3 weeks later, Eleanor said. Behind the barn near the edge of the corn rows, his side was crushed. We think a piece of the windmill fell on him during the storm. Your father buried him himself. We never told you. Diane's voice was a whisper, but he's here now. Eleanor looked at her. I know. No one said a word. The ticking clock on the mantel became thunderous. Lily turned the photograph over in her lap. On the back, written in faded blue ink, Diane and Toby. April 1998. Tom rubbed his face with both hands, pacing. This doesn't make sense. Are we saying... What? That this is the same dog that Toby came back? Diane stood shaky. Maybe it's reincarnation. Eleanor shook her head. Then why would he look exactly the same? What if he didn't come back as a different body? Diane said, staring down at the photo. What if he never left? Tom scoffed, nervous. You think he's been alive underground for 25 years? No, Eleanor said. But maybe something deeper held on to him. Not his body. Something else. Tom leaned against the wall, hands gripping his waist. This is insane. Lily spoke, then quiet but firm. He waved at me. Diane turned to her. What do you mean, baby? In my dreams. I told you. Every night since I was a baby. He never said words. Just waved. Like he was stuck somewhere. Like he couldn't move. Like he was buried but awake. Tom's face drained of color. Lily looked down. I wasn't scared. He never wanted to hurt me. He just wanted me to find him. Eleanor sat back down, almost collapsing into the chair. Her eyes glistened. What if time isn't as straight as we think it is? Tom turned sharply. Oh, come on. No, listen, she said. What if something happened in that storm? What if something tore more than roofs and trees? What if it tore the space around him too, bent it, froze it? Diane whispered. You think Toby was trapped? In time? In memory? In grief, Eleanor said. That dog was loyal to a fault. If he died thinking he failed to protect her, Lily touched the photograph again. He waited. Tom crossed the room, looked out the window, staring at the vast dark field beyond. So what now? We pretend we didn't bury him? That he's some ghost dog brought back by guilt? No one answered. Eleanor opened a drawer in the old credenza and pulled out a tin box. Inside were more photos, more fragments of another time. One of Diane asleep on the couch, Toby curled beneath her. Another of Toby chasing butterflies in the summer grass. She laid them out on the table like evidence at a trial no one ever expected to happen. I don't know how he's here, she said, but I know that's him. The weight of her words dropped like a stone. Lily stood and walked toward the window. She looked out at the windless night. Quiet. Still. Then without turning, she said, He didn't die wrong. He died alone. They all turned. He needed someone to find him, so he could stop waving. No one moved. The child's words hung in the air like breath and cold. Later that night, Diane sat with Lily as she tucked her into the guest room bed. The photo of her and Toby rested on the nightstand. You think people can come back too? Lily asked. Diane smiled weakly. Sometimes I think people never really leave. Lily blinked. Like dreams, like love, Diane whispered. In the hallway, Tom leaned against the doorframe listening. His logic had taken a hit today. And deep down beneath the doubt, a strange sense of awe had taken root. Like standing too close to a story you thought was fiction, only to realize it had your last name. He looked at the photo in Eleanor's hands once more, then out the window, out across the empty field where the wind had once spoken. The knock on the door came just after sunrise. Not urgent, not hesitant, just steady. Like someone who knew the weight of what they were about to enter. Diane opened it slowly. On the porch stood a woman in a faded gray coat, a clipboard tucked under one arm, her silver hair tied into a neat braid. She didn't smile, but her eyes calm, dark, deliberate, felt like they could see straight through the wood of the house. Dr. Emery Lane, she said softly. Animal cognition and behavioral psychology. Your vet called me. Tom appeared behind Diane, already tense. You're here about the dog. Dr. Lane nodded, and the girl. Inside, the morning light filtered through half-drawn curtains, painting gold across Lily's curls as she sat cross-legged on the floor. She was humming to herself quietly, sketching on a large sheet of paper with stubby crayons lost in whatever private world had never fully let her go. Lily, Diane said gently, This is Dr. Lane. She just wants to talk. Lily looked up. About Toby. Dr. Lane knelt down so she was eye level. Exactly. They moved to the den where Lily sprawled out with her papers while Dr. Lane sat beside her scribbling notes. No recorder. No cold glass table. Just two people in a room where something strange had already begun long before either of them arrived. Dr. Lane didn't interrogate. She observed. Can you tell me what you draw when you think of Toby? She asked. I don't draw him, Lily said. He draws for me. Dr. Lane tilted her head. What do you mean? Lily held up a crayon-scribbled image. It showed a swirling mass of black and brown lines, wine clouds, chaos. At the center, a tiny shape that could be a dog paws, raised as if clawing toward the sky. I dreamed this before we found him, Lily said. The night before. And this one. Lily handed her a second picture. It was a circle, ragged, jagged. A well at the bottom, two glowing green dots. Eyes. He was stuck in the hole, Lily said matter-of-factly. He told me with his paw. Dr. Lane blinked slowly. You've seen these things in dreams? Lily shook her head. Not dreams. Before dreams. They come before I fall asleep. In the wind. Inside my ears. Tom paced in the kitchen, pretending not to listen, but visibly tightening every time Lily spoke. Diane sat across the room, hand gripped tightly around a mug she hadn't sipped from in 10 minutes. Dr. Lane studied the drawings. Have you ever seen a real well like this? Lily nodded. In the backfield. But it's all covered now. That stopped everyone. Tom looked up. There is no well back there. Eleanor entered the room from the hallway, her voice low and unreadable. There was. Diane turned startled. What? Eleanor moved towards the couch, sat heavily. Old irrigation well. We sealed it when I was a girl. Storm years eroded most of it. By the time you were Lily's age, it was just a dip in the grass. Tom's jaw clenched. We never saw it, because it was covered, Eleanor said. We didn't want you kids falling in. Dr. Lane tapped her pen slowly on the edge of the drawing. Has Lily been back there recently? Diane shook her head. She's never even been allowed past the barn. It's all fenced off. Dr. Lane nodded almost to herself. This, she pointed at another crayon sketch, showing twisted trees, a broken sky, and long streaks of diagonal gray. This looks like a tornado. It is, Lily said. The one that took Toby away. That was in 1998, Diane murmured. Dr. Lane looked up, eyes serious now. Which means Lily is referencing events from before she was born. Tom finally snapped. So, what's your theory? She's channeling a ghost, talking to reincarnated dogs. Or are you about to tell us this is some shared trauma hallucination? Dr. Lane didn't flinch. No, Mr. Reeves. I'm telling you, your daughter may be showing signs of something much rarer. Something we still don't fully understand. She turned back to Lily, her voice gentle again. Lily, when Toby talks to you, what does it feel like? Lily paused. Her eyes moved toward the window. Like wind that goes inside. Not around me. Through me. Tom swallowed hard. Dr. Lane continued. Some scientists believe real memory, can be encoded in cells, passed down through blood. Not like facts, but like echoes. Are you talking about genetic memory? Diane asked. Some call it that. Others call it epigenetic inheritance. Some indigenous cultures call it soul print. I don't care what it's named. What matters is this child is remembering something she has no biological reason to know. Tom sat down finally, shaking his head. And the dog? You saying he remembers too? Dr. Lane looked at the photographs still laid out on the table from the night before. I'm saying trauma doesn't always die with the body. And some connections cut deeper than the flesh. The room went still again. Outside, the wind stirred. It was light at first, barely noticeable, then stronger. The front screen door began to creak on its hinges. Trees bowed low, grass rippling in invisible waves, and then a low whistle through the chimney. High-pitched, unmistakable. Lily didn't move. Toby's calling again, she said. Calm as rain. Everyone froze. Diane stood. Tom paled. Eleanor closed her eyes. Dr. Lane stood slowly, walked to the window. She placed her palm on the glass. A cold breath curled along the pane's edge. It's happening again, she whispered. He's not finished. The wind slammed the porch swing into the side of the house. One of the drawings on the coffee table lifted, spiraled, and landed face up on the floor. Oh well, a sky, and a paw reaching upward. That night, the wind didn't stop. It howled like a warning, or a memory that refused to be buried again. Toby began to heal faster than anyone expected. Within days of being rescued, his breathing steadied. His appetite returned. His limbs, once trembling and limp, regained enough strength to rise and walk. By the end of the week, he was padding softly through Eleanor's house like a ghost who had learned to wear skin again. But something was wrong. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't play. He never barked, and he never stopped watching Lily. He would sit by the window near her chair, his green eyes fixed on her like he was trying to remember a song she once sang, something ancient, familiar, and just beyond the reach of language. The scar on his paw had healed, but his stare hadn't. It was intense, haunted, not fearful, not aggressive, but as if he recognized her in a way no one else did and needed her to remember something too. When the wind blew, it all got worse. It started subtly, a breeze during breakfast, a rustle in the trees, and Toby would begin to pace. Slow at first, then faster, head low, nose twitching, tail rigid. By mid-morning, the pacing became scratching at the door, then whines, then low guttural cries that vibrated with an emotion too tangled to name, like grief mangled by time. Tom tried to calm him with food toys, even an old tennis ball he dug out of the garage. Toby ignored all of it. Dog's losing it, Tom muttered one morning. But Diane didn't answer. She was watching Lily. Their daughter had grown quieter. Still sweet, still smiling, but there was a shadow beneath her eyes. Some mornings, she woke before the sun already dressed, sitting on the porch barefoot, staring into the fields. I think he's calling me, she said one morning. Who? Diane asked, though she already knew. Toby, Lily replied. In the wind. Then came the first night. It was just past 2 a.m. when Diane woke to the sound of the front door creaking open. She sat up, heart racing, listening. No footsteps, no voices. Just that hollow groan of wood and hinge, and somewhere beyond it, the sigh of wind sweeping over earth. She ran down the hall and found Lily's bed empty. Panic surged up her spine. Tom, she shouted. She's gone. They tore through the house, checked every room. Nothing. Tom grabbed a flashlight. Diane didn't wait. She sprinted barefoot across the back porch and down the steps, her nightgown tangling in her knees. The wind was strong, sharp-edged, and cold for summer. It roared across the field like it remembered being born here. And in the middle of it, Lily, standing in the field, barefoot, hair tangled by the wind, whispering to someone who wasn't there. Tom called out, "Lily." She didn't turn. They ran to her, stumbling over dry brush and loose earth. When they reached her, she looked up at them calmly. No tears, no confusion, just clarity. "I had to come," she said. "He's scared again." "Who, baby?" Diane asked, wrapping her arms around her. "Toby. He thought I left him." Diane felt her body go cold. "You were dreaming?" "No." Lily shook her head. "He called me." Tom looked back toward the house. In the window, barely visible in the dark, was Toby staring out. His silhouette was still rigid. His breath fogged the glass. The flashlight flickered. A second gust hit them harder this time. Diane turned her back to it, instinctively shielding Lily. The wind howled, not like weather, but like a name. Tom swore under his breath, "Let's get her inside." But Lily pulled free, just slightly. She stepped forward and whispered into the air, "Don't be afraid. I'll help you." Then she turned to her parents and said something they would never forget. "He's not trying to get out. He's trying to get back in." The next morning, Eleanor found muddy footprints leading from the porch to the edge of the field. They were small, and beside them, spaced unevenly, a second set. Paw prints, but Toby had never left the house. Dr. Lane returned that afternoon. She sat with Lily again, watched her draw. This time, Lily handed her a single image. A split scene on one side, Toby underground, curled in darkness. On the other, Toby walking into the wind ears, forward, heading toward a girl standing in a doorway. "He keeps trying," Lily said, "but he's not whole yet." Dr. Lane frowned. "What do you mean?" "He left something behind," Lily said. "Something important. Something broken." Diane stood behind them, arms crossed. "Do you think she's sleepwalking?" Dr. Lane shook her head. "Sleepwalking doesn't come with coordinated conversations. Doesn't explain shared hallucinations either." Tom muttered, "We're past explaining." The wind picked up again that evening. Toby howled, but not like a dog. It was long, slow, filled with something cracked. Not quite animal, not quite human. Lily didn't flinch. She went to him, pressed her forehead to his, and whispered, "We'll go back there. Together." The dog's body sagged against her, and in that moment the wind outside the house stopped, just for a moment, like it was listening. It began with a sentence no parent is ever prepared to hear from a 5-year-old. Lily stood at the foot of their bed, barefoot, her voice low and steady in the dark. "The wind is calling Toby again," she said. Then without pause, "But this time it's calling me too." Tom sat up first, heart pounding. Diane blinked into the half-light, trying to wake herself into a different version of reality where their daughter didn't say things like that, things that stuck to your ribs, like cold water. Tom threw back the covers. "Baby, it was just a dream." Lily didn't move. Her eyes, impossibly awake, locked on something beyond them both. Something far outside this room, this house, this moment. "No," she said. "It's real. It's been getting louder." The wind outside keened softly, curling around the edges of the old farmhouse. And then, as if summoned, Toby barked. Only once. Low, drawn out. Not warning, not joy. Something older, heavier. They found him standing by the back door, staring into the dark field. Not pacing, not whining. Just waiting. Tom checked the clock. 3:17 a.m. "Okay," Diane whispered. "Enough's enough." By morning, the house had changed. Tom climbed into the ice and pulled out the old security cams he'd used years ago when raccoons kept breaking into the chicken coop. Dusty, cheap, barely reliable, but they'd do. He wired 2 on the back porch, another by the edge of the fence facing the field. He didn't say it out loud, but Diane saw it on his face. He was scared. Scared not of Toby, not even of Lily, but of something else. Something that might answer back. That night, they let the cameras run. By 2:46 a.m., Lily's bed was empty. She didn't sneak. She drifted slow, calm. Her feet moved like they didn't belong to her. Her eyes stayed half-lidded. She opened the back door without a sound, and Toby was already waiting, tail, still ears lifted into the wind. They walked in tandem, into the tall grass, toward the hollow in the center of the field. The cameras captured all of it. No words, no lights, just movement and wind. At 3:08 a.m., both Lily and Toby stopped, side by side, facing nothing. But the wind, it shifted. In the footage, the grass around them begins to bend inward, like something invisible is breathing from beneath the earth. And then a voice. At first, it's mistaken for static. Then the pitch changes, higher, sharper, wavering but deliberate. Not speaking words, but something close. A call, not to them, but for them. Tom nearly dropped the laptop when he reviewed the footage. What the hell is this? Diane pressed her hands to her mouth, tears sliding over her cheeks. Lily, watching quietly over their shoulders, only said, "He remembers now." By the following day, the wind didn't stop. It raked through trees like claws. It tore shingles off the barn roof. The swing in the yard groaned so violently, Tom had to chain it down. The air felt wrong, heavy, saturated with pressure that had no physical source. That evening, Eleanor turned on the weather radio. Static, then a voice. A major system building west of the county line. Strong rotation in upper levels. If trajectory holds, expect thunderstorm development and possible tornadic activity within 24 to 36 hours. Diane stared at the map. The eye of the system was forming exactly over where their land sat. She looked at Tom. This isn't just a storm. He didn't argue. That night, they didn't sleep. Tom sat with the footage frame by frame. At 3:11 a.m., Lily tilts her head. Toby steps forward. Both freeze. A shape-Noah distortion appears in the tall grass, barely visible. A flicker, like air being twisted into knots. And then gone. Diane gripped the edges of the laptop. She's not just seeing things. She's hearing them too. This isn't some imaginary friend. This is... Tom turned away. It's a goddamn haunting. Lily, sitting behind them, finally spoke. It's a memory, she said. They turned. Toby's not haunted, she whispered. He's hurting. And he keeps thinking it's still happening. What's still happening? Diane asked. The storm, Lily said. The night he died. The room chilled. At 3:00 a.m. sharp, the door creaked open again. But this time, Tom and Diane were ready. They followed her. Silent. Barefoot. Staying far enough not to be seen, close enough not to lose her. Toby led. Lily followed. At the center of the field, both stopped. And then Lily spoke into the dark. Not to her parents, not to Toby, but to something else. It's okay now, she whispered. You don't have to be afraid. I know where you are. The wind roared, suddenly violent. It knocked Tom to one knee. A sound surged through the field. Not a scream, not a cry, but a voice with no mouth. Like the field itself was speaking. Back at the house, the storm radar blinked red. Cyclonic signature confirmed. Wind speeds doubling. Atmospheric pressure collapsing. Diane looked out the window. And in the distance, the field began to glow. Not brightly, not like light, but like memory. Like a scar beneath skin finally surfacing. The wind changed first. Not in speed, but in tone. It wasn't howling anymore. It whistled like breath between broken teeth. Like a memory that refused to die. It slid through the cracks of the house, pressed against the windows, like fingers trying to get in. Then came the sky. The clouds gathered in a circular, unnatural formation, like something swirling without permission. Deep purple laced with sickly green. The radar on Tom's phone lit up with warnings. Tornado watch. Thunderstorm advisory. Shelters open. But inside the house, no one was moving towards safety. Because Lily had just said something that dropped the air from the room like a trap door opening beneath them. Toby didn't die. Not all of him. Diane crouched beside her daughter, her voice a thin whisper. What do you mean? Lily's eyes weren't frightened. They were fixed, focused, like a compass drawn to magnetic grief. I mean, she said he got out of his body. But not all the way. A part of him is still stuck. Where it happened. Tom stepped forward, unsure whether to panic or pray. Where what happened? The fall, Lily replied. The collapse? The place with no air and no sky. Where he waited. Eleanor, silent until now, closed her eyes. The well. Lily turned to her. The one behind your house? Tom frowned. That well's been sealed since you were a girl. You said so yourself. I did, Eleanor whispered. We filled it. Bricks, cement. My father didn't want us near it. She looked at Lily now, voice shaking. How do you know about it? I've seen it, Lily said. In my dreams. The round mouth, the cold, the silence. Outside, a branch cracked off a tree and slammed into the side of the barn. The wind shrieked like metal torn in half. No one said another word. Lily rose to her feet. We have to go. Now, before it happens again. The field was a war zone of sound. Grass flattened beneath them. The old shed doors banged open and shut. Toby walked at Lily's side, not behind, not ahead, matching her pace, step for step, like he knew exactly where she was going. They circled behind Eleanor's house. The earth dipped slightly, hidden beneath a cluster of wild overgrowth and an old pile of stacked stones. This is it, Lily said, pointing. He fell here. Tom squinted. That's just a rock pile. No, Eleanor said. That's where the well was. We covered it in '98, after the storm, after Toby disappeared. Why bricks? Diane asked. Because the wood boards collapsed, Eleanor answered. And because we were too broken to dig. Her voice dropped to a whisper. We thought maybe he'd run. We never imagined he was underneath us. Lily knelt, her fingers skimming the edges of the stones. He never left. The dog behind her whimpered, not a sound of fear, a sound of recognition. Tom grabbed a crowbar from the truck bed. He didn't argue. He didn't ask. He just moved. The first brick came loose easily. So did the second. The third came with a smell. Earth, damp, closed. The kind of air that hadn't moved in decades. By the fifth layer, the opening was wide enough to shine a flashlight down. Diane leaned over and gasped. 30 feet below, collapsed boards. A pocket of hollowed dirt. Bones. Gray. Curled. Still. Jesus, Tom muttered. Eleanor backed away, both hands to her face. He was there the whole time. Diane wept openly. We buried him above himself. Lily didn't cry. She crouched beside the well, placed her hand on the rim of broken brick, and closed her eyes. Toby lay behind her, unmoving. His body stretched out, flat ears, pressed back. As if he too remembered. He needed us to find him, Lily said, so he could be whole. Tom exhaled shakily. What do? We dig, Diane answered. We bring him out. By nightfall, the storm was no longer a threat. It was a presence. Lightning cracked open the sky in sheets. Thunder thudded like a slow, endless drum, and yet no one inside the house flinched, because beneath the porch, wrapped in an old wool blanket, was a box, small, wooden, and newly filled. Inside it, what remained of Toby. His bones had been carried out gently, reverently. No one dared speak as they laid them down. When Lily placed a small drawing into the box, one she'd made years ago of a dog with wings, Toby the living, Toby let out a long, breathy sigh. His body shivered once, then stilled. Not dead, not asleep, but released. The storm passed in the early hours. But something had changed. Not just the weather, the air, the house, the dog. Toby opened his eyes that morning, and for the first time wagged his tail. Just once, but it was enough. The house was silent after the storm. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the silence that comes after something sacred and strange has passed through. Like the air itself knew not to speak too soon. They'd buried the bones at dawn. Eleanor had chosen the spot beneath the willow tree where Diane used to sit and read as a girl, where the earth stayed cool even in summer. Lily placed a drawing on the wooden box before it was lowered into the soil. A dog with folded wings, eyes closed, body at peace. The box didn't feel like a coffin. It felt like a key. But what it had unlocked still hung in the air. By noon, Toby the living one stood at the edge of the porch, staring toward the willow. His body was different now. No longer trembling, no longer tense. He stood with weight in his stance, breath even. He didn't pace. He didn't whine. But he also didn't come inside. He stood still as if waiting for the rest of himself to arrive. Dr. Lane arrived just before sunset. She'd seen the storm reports. She'd seen the photos Diane had sent the uncovered well. The remains, the time-stamped footage of Lily and Toby moving in unison toward a place they shouldn't have known existed. And now she stood quietly in the yard, her coat unbuttoned, clipboard forgotten in the truck. She stared at Toby and said only one thing. Who are you, boy? Toby didn't move. His ears twitched, but his eyes didn't blink. He stared at the willow tree like it was calling him by name. Inside, the family sat around the dining table. No one touched their food. Eleanor cradled a mug of tea that had long gone cold. Diane twisted a napkin in her lap until it tore. Tom leaned back, arms crossed, staring at the floor like it held answers he didn't have the courage to ask out loud. Only Lily was calm. She sat upright, feet swinging just above the floor, hands folded in her lap. He's not confused anymore, she said. Diane looked up. What do you mean? He knows he's not the first Toby. But he also knows he is. The room fell still. Tom broke the silence. So what is he, a ghost in a new body? No, Lily replied. A memory that became real again. Dr. Lane stepped into the room, then closing the door behind her softly. I've seen animals mimic, she said. Seen trauma carry across generations, even across species. But this, she sat down slowly. This is something else. Tom frowned. What are you saying? Dr. Lane folded her hands. There's a theory, fringe but gaining traction, that emotional memory, deep, primitive imprinting can live longer than the body. That under extreme conditions, it can reassemble. Through instinct, through resonance, through environment. She looked at Toby, who was now lying beneath the willow head, resting on his paws, eyes open. Sometimes the soul doesn't reincarnate. Sometimes it echoes. Until something listens, Diane whispered. So that dog, he's not just a different dog. No, Dr. Lane said. He might be a carrier. Not born with Toby's flesh, but with his imprint. Tom scoffed, but his voice lacked conviction. You're saying the dog remembered itself. I'm saying Lily remembered with him, Dr. Lane said. And that might be what made the difference. Lily stood from her chair then. She didn't announce anything. She just walked outside. The grass had settled since the storm pressed flat in waves across the field like a memory frozen in mid-motion. The wind was quiet warm, the sky orange and fading. Lily walked straight to Toby and sat cross-legged in front of him. He lifted his head. They stared at each other. "You came back broken," she said softly. "Half here, half there." Toby's ears shifted slightly. Lily reached forward and placed her hand gently on his chest. "I think the part that stayed behind was waiting for us to find it. And now that we did, you can finish what you started." She stood, brushed the grass from her dress, and turned back toward the house. Everyone stood on the porch watching. Diane, Eleanor, Tom, and Dr. Lane all silent. "Where are you going, baby?" Diane asked. Lily looked up at her mother with that strange calm again. That steadiness none of them would ever forget. "I need to give him back the last piece." That night, she asked for something no one expected. "Can I sleep outside?" Diane hesitated. "It's cold? I won't be alone." Tom started to protest, but Dr. Lane shook her head gently. "Let her." They gave her a sleeping bag, a flashlight, and a pillow. She laid them down beneath the willow tree. Toby curled beside her, his body still and warm. Above them, the sky glittered clean and strange. The wind returned just barely, just enough to be felt. Lily closed her eyes and whispered, "Here, this part is yours." In the morning, she woke with Toby's head resting against her chest. His breath was soft, slow, and his eyes, when they opened, were different, clearer, like a door had finally shut. They never spoke of what Lily gave him that night, not in exact words, but afterward, Toby began to live like a creature not only of memory, but of presence. He played, he barked, he ran, and Lily, for the first time in weeks, slept through the night without dreams. Two Tobys, one body made of fur and breath, one body made of dirt and waiting, but one soul finally whole. The morning came with a strange stillness, the kind that feels like a question waiting to be answered. It wasn't just the silence, it was the weight beneath it. The stillness after a decision has already been made. Lily stood on the porch, already dressed, already barefoot. Her eyes were fixed on the old willow, but her thoughts were somewhere deeper beyond the field, beyond the grass, beyond the skin of the world. Toby stood beside her. He was calmer now. Not healed in the way broken things are fixed, but in the way storms settle after they've said what they came to say. "I think it's time," Lily whispered. No one told her what to do. No one gave permission. And yet, everyone followed. Diane stepped out first, unsure, hugging her arms around herself. Tom moved next, slower, his boots heavy in the damp earth. Eleanor came last, standing by the door, eyes soft and sad, like someone who's read the last page of a book too many times. Dr. Lane watched from the fence arm's folded notebook, forgotten in her bag. Lily didn't look back. She walked toward the well. The sun sat low behind a wall of clouds, gray and orange, bleeding together light soft like breath. The overgrowth around the old well had been trimmed back the day they found the bones. But now the clearing looked changed. Not cleaned, not disturbed, but prepared, like the land had been waiting. Lily approached the rim, its circle of brick, weathered and cracked like a mouth long silent. She placed her hand gently on the top layer of stone. Her fingers didn't tremble. Toby sat beside her, head bowed, tail still. She crouched down, resting her palm flat against the earth, closed her eyes. Then she whispered, "Thank you for coming back. But you don't have to stay anymore." The wind rose instantly. It wasn't gradual. It came like a door flung open from the other side. A sudden sweep of cold and force circling the well, lifting dust and leaves in wild spirals. The trees groaned. The barn creaked. The air filled with a sound just short of a voice, long and low and full of longing. Toby stood, not startled, not frightened, like he understood. He turned to Lily, and for a breathless second, he stared into her with everything he could not say. All the days waiting in the dark. All the time buried in memory. All the weight of love that had nowhere to go. He gave one long, low howl. Not pain, not warning. Release. Then he lunged forward, toward the well, toward the mouth of what held him all these years. His body surged with purpose. And before anyone could move, he leapt legs, pushing off like a final goodbye, and vanished. Diane screamed. Tom ran forward, sliding through grass and dust. Toby. Lily stayed kneeling, her face wet, but her body still. Tom reached the edge and looked down only to find nothing. No body, no sound, just earth, as if the well had never opened, as if it had taken back what was always its. The wind howled louder than it ever had, screaming across the field, slapping against the house, tearing through the trees with the force of 1,000 broken years. Then, just as suddenly, silence, not quiet, not calm, silence, like breath held, like a soul exhaled, like an answer finally whispered into the dirt. Tom stumbled backward. Diane dropped to her knees, sobbing. Eleanor just stood, one hand covering her mouth, her other hand clutching her chest. Dr. Lane stepped forward, her face pale, her eyes wide. He chose it, she whispered. He finished it. Lily turned toward them, her voice steady. He went home. They stayed there for a long time. No one said much. The storm had passed, but what remained was not destruction. It was something gentler, something holy. The sky opened up a little streaks of gold, bleeding through the clouds like forgiveness. The air smelled different, softer, like memory after grief. That night, Lily slept without stirring. No dreams, no calls, no footsteps in the dark. When Diane came to check on her, she found a crayon drawing tucked under her pillow. A field, a well, a dog, and wings. But not on the dog, on the wind. The sky had gone wide again. For the first time in weeks, the wind was just wind. No more whispers, no more memories slicing through the grass like unseen blades. The trees stood still. The air had lost its tension. It was as if the land itself had exhaled. 3 days had passed since Toby disappeared into the mouth of the well. No trace, no remains. Just the quiet afterward. And Lily. She hadn't said much since. She ate her meals without fuss. She slept deeply. She didn't ask for Toby. She didn't cry. But everyone knew something inside her had shifted. This morning she asked to return to the playground, the one where everything had started. Diane drove her parked under the old cottonwood tree and watched as her daughter stepped out barefoot, just like she had that day. The slide was the same. The rusted swing set still leaned left. The wood chips were sun-bleached and scattered. But somehow the space felt emptier. Not physically, spiritually. Like something once woven through the air was no longer here. Lily walked slowly toward the center of the yard and stood still, eyes closed. She didn't move for several minutes. Diane sat quietly on the bench, resisting every parental instinct to fill the silence with noise. Then Lily opened her eyes and knelt. She pulled a crayon and paper from the little satchel she always carried now, and she began to draw. Her hands moved without hesitation. No sketching, no corrections. Just steady lines, deliberate colors. When she was done, she stood and brought the picture to Diane. Diane took it. At the center of the drawing, Toby. But not the Toby who had emerged from the dirt. This Toby was taller somehow. Freer. His ears perked, his fur shining, almost glowing. And around him, not chains, not shadows, wind. But this wind didn't scream. It swirled gently like music without sound. And Toby was smiling. Diane swallowed hard. "What's this, baby?" Lily looked at the picture, her voice light but certain. "He's not sad anymore." Diane blinked, a lump catching in her throat. "He told you that?" Lily nodded. "He said thank you and goodbye." She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Her eyes were dry, but full of something stronger than grief piece. Diane folded the drawing gently and placed it in her purse. Then she pulled Lily close and hugged her. Tight. Not like she was afraid of losing her, but like she finally understood what Lily had been carrying this whole time. When they got back to the house, Eleanor was on the porch. She stood up when she saw them, her hands clasped. Lily walked over quietly and handed her a second drawing. Eleanor unfolded it with shaking fingers. This one was different. It showed a small girl herself, decades ago, kneeling by the same willow tree. Behind her, half hidden, was Toby, only he wasn't quite visible. He was made of outline, memory, regret. Eleanor stared for a long time. Then her voice cracked. "He waited." Lily nodded. "He never blamed you." Eleanor's face crumbled. She sank slowly into the rocking chair behind her, holding the drawing to her chest. Her lips parted, but the words didn't come. Only tears. Big, unfiltered, unstoppable. It wasn't just relief, it was release. Through her sobs, she whispered, "Toby forgave me. For what I didn't do, for what I couldn't face. I thought I buried him in silence, but he was still calling." She looked up at Lily. "And only you knew how to listen." That evening, the house felt lighter. They cooked together for the first time in weeks. Diane made cornbread. Tom grilled squash. Eleanor played an old vinyl from 1973 songs that sounded like dusk and forgiveness. Lily laughed at something Tom said at dinner. Really laughed. A sharp, sudden burst of joy that filled the whole kitchen. And Diane realized the house was no longer holding its breath. After sunset, Lily walked alone to the edge of the yard. She didn't say goodbye this time. She didn't have to. She looked at the sky, clear, vast, open. Then she knelt in the grass and placed one final drawing at the base of the fence. She pinned it down with a small stone. In it, Toby stood on a hill of tall golden grass, wind dancing around him. His eyes looked forward, past the viewer, toward something no one else could see. The words above his head, read in Lily's careful handwriting, "I'll remember for both of us." And then she walked back to the house, not empty, just whole. It began quietly. A shift not in words, but in behavior. Subtle, steady, and undeniable. Something had changed in the house, and in the people who lived there. The storm had passed, the earth had swallowed what it was owed, and now there was space. for stillness, for reflection, for growth. Tom started waking earlier. He built a bird feeder and placed it near the porch where he once stood to watch for danger. Now he watched for finches, cardinals, and the occasional hawk. He read about native grasses, planted wildflowers near the barn. He stopped using poison on the weeds. There's a rhythm to things, he said one morning to Diane as they walked the fence line. And I think we've been cutting across it too long. Diane began volunteering at the local shelter, helping with rescues. She learned to listen not just to barking or meowing, but to silence, to tension in the way an animal breathed or looked away. They know, she said once. Before we do. They always know. Eleanor began tending the willow again. She trimmed the low branches, pulled weeds, placed a small stone near its roots. She didn't speak to it out loud, but she stayed there, often humming songs no one had heard since the 90s. And Lily began to write. It started with a few crayon drawings, the kind she used to carry in her satchel. But now the pages came with words, sentences, little phrases that felt too big for someone her age, yet too honest to have come from anyone else. She called it The Dog Who Waited in the Wind. It wasn't a storybook, not exactly. It was more like a letter to anyone who had ever felt lost, to anything that had ever waited too long. In the story, the dog didn't have a name, not at first. He lived in the spaces between the grass and sky, barking not to scare anyone, but to be found. And one day, a girl with bare feet and quiet eyes heard him. She didn't shout. She didn't run. She listened. And because she listened, he became whole again. Lily shared the story at the library's Young Authors Day. She read it aloud to a room full of other children, some squirming, some staring. And by the end, even the loudest kid in the front row had gone still. One girl raised her hand. Was the dog real? Lily smiled. He was real enough to wait. The story spread, not like wildfire, more like roots, quiet, slow, steady. Parents shared it at bedtime. A teacher pinned it to the classroom wall. Someone photocopied it and handed it out at the farmer's market. And then someone, no one quite knew, who suggested a memorial. Not in town, not in front of the school, but in the field. The exact spot where Lily had knelt that first day, where her voice had found something the wind had hidden for decades. The town came together in ways it hadn't in years. Old disagreements dropped. Rivalries paused. Someone donated wood. Someone else brought paint. A carpenter shaped the body. A retired sculptor worked the eyes. When they unveiled it, one golden Sunday morning, the crowd was quiet. There stood Toby, not fierce, not beaten, waiting, his head tilted slightly, his ears up, his tail curved, not wagging, but lifted mid-motion. The wind caught the tips of the tall grass around him and spun in soft spirals. On a plaque at the base of the statue, to the ones who wait, to the ones who hear, to the wind that never forgets. Lily placed a single drawing at his paws, then stepped back. Later that evening, long after the ceremony had ended and the people had gone, Diane stood alone by the statue. The wind was soft, brushing her hair back from her face. She whispered, "Thank you, boy," then walked home, not to forget, but to carry forward. In the years that followed, the well was sealed once more, this time with care, with flowers planted in a ring around it. A peace offering. A promise. The willow grew taller. The field grew wilder. And once in a while, a visitor, stranger, or neighbor would stand beside Toby's statue and just listen. Sometimes they heard nothing. Other times, the faintest sound. A breath in the grass, a tail swishing the air, like memory or maybe something older. Still watching, still loving, still whole. The field was still there. Years passed. Storms came and went. Trees grew taller. Fences were repaired, broken again, then mended once more. Life moved forward like it always does. But the field stayed. It never became a subdivision, never got paved over. It remained wild and golden, just beyond the town's edge, sacred not because of anything it possessed, but because of what it had released. Lily grew too, from the quiet child with the drawings and the long silences, into a woman who told stories, not to impress, but to awaken. She didn't shout. She didn't perform. She shared softly, deliberately, as if passing something fragile from hand to hand. She spoke in libraries, then schools, then theaters. Her voice reached podcast microphones, then radios, and eventually television. But no matter how wide the audience became, her stories always returned to one field. One gust of wind, one set of eyes. She never said Toby's name publicly. She didn't have to. People remembered. On the 20th anniversary of the day, the wind first called her name. The town gathered again. This time there were new faces, new children. Some of them sat cross-legged near the old willow tree, not knowing why it felt so safe, so strangely calm. Some of them looked at the wooden statue with the kind of reverence usually reserved for legends. But to Lily it wasn't a monument. It was a reminder that not all voices are loud, not all stories are told in language, and not all love ends. She stood before the group now, 30, maybe a little older. Her hair still wild, her hands still full of drawings, her eyes holding a stillness that had taken years to understand. She told them the story of the dog in the wind, of the well that forgot, of the girl who remembered. But this time at the end, she said something new. I think he was never waiting for rescue, she said. I think he was waiting for witness. The audience didn't move. Even the smallest children had gone silent. Lily stepped back. She didn't say thank you. She didn't bow. She just walked into the field. Camera pulls wide. The sun is low burnt orange against a sky turning lavender. Wind bends the grass gently. The field sways like a body breathing. Far in the distance, a group of children laughing, chasing kites, their voices high and bright. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks not mournfully, but with joy. The camera pans past them, gliding over grass, past the willow, toward the wooden statue that is weathered but never aged. Toby, forever looking east, forever mid-step, as if ready to return or guide. Then wider still, until Lily is a figure beneath the sky, walking into the waving golden sea. The wind picks up slightly, tugging at her coat. She doesn't turn back. Her hand lifts. Just a little, a wave, or maybe a memory, or maybe just breath. Fade to black, silence, one full beat. Then a single whispered line appears. Not all hands are visible. Some are made of wind of love and of memory that never dies.